Hey guys, Peter Cap here, and welcome to another episode of Peter's No Cap History, the show where I combine my loves of fantasy and history to provide potential points of inspiration for aspiring fantasy artists, writers, and world builders. This is another episode where I want to prove that I can put my money where my mouth is regarding taking cues from history and integrating it into my work. A lot of people really liked the episode I made that showed how ancient Rome inspired Gottschalk's The Uniter. Today we're going to be talking about how medieval and Renaissance Italy inspired Gottschalk's The Six Strangers. Here are 3 different ways medieval and Renaissance Italy inspired Gottschalk's The Six Strangers. Number 1, the language. So technically in universe, everyone is speaking Italian, which I call Cradleland. And this is manifested in a bunch of different ways. There's a lot of terms that I go with their Italian counterparts. For example, instead of citizens, I use cittadini. Instead of the Griffin Guard, I go with the Guardia Grifone. There's a lexicon I added with the second edition of Gottschalk's The Six Strangers, which elaborates on all the Italian words used. Tragically, I don't know Italian. I took classes on it in high school. To be honest, they weren't that good for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into, but in essence, a lot of the information didn't stick. It's on my to-do list of stuff I want to learn properly, just like with American Sign Language. I'll get to both of those things eventually. There are like 2 or 3 full Italian sentences in the book. Don't worry, I didn't use Google Translate. I used a way better translator called DeepL, which is basically Google Translate but good. And even that I verified with Italian speakers. So it is authentic Italian you are seeing in the book. Second way this book was inspired by Renaissance Italy, the mercenary campagne. I have a bunch of different campagne in the Gottschalk's world that are inspired by actual real-life mercenary campagne. The Guardia Grifone, which is the mercenary campagne that Leo is a part of, are based pretty much on like a lot of Condata armies in the late medieval period and early Renaissance. Armies such as these would eventually become the basis of standing armies. Claudius Ironhand and his company of mercenaries are based on the concept of broken lances or lances spazzate. Basically mercenary knights or men of arms. People sometimes call knights like these condottieri, but that's not really a proper word for it. Another company that's based on this stuff is Diana's Rangers, which you don't see them in Gottschalk's Six Strangers, but you will see them briefly in Gottschalk's Realms of the Nephilim, and even more so in Volume 3. Diana's Rangers are based on several different things. The White Company, which were English longbowmen that were fighting in Italy, as well as the wider phenomenon of famous mercenary crossbowmen and gunners. Genoa, for example, was very famous for its mercenary crossbowmen in this regard. But they weren't the only ones. Siena was known for this stuff, Bologna. These were very skilled ranged marksmen who put their knowledge to good use. I basically combined those things to make like this mercenary company that was just skilled with all sorts of ranged weapons. And finally, number 3, the cities. Okay, I had a lot of fun with this. You can see the smile on my face. Many of the cities in Cradlelands are not directly based on Italian cities, but more like a combination of like 2 or 3. Let's go over this piece by piece. Now, sometimes the comparison is 1-to-1, which is very much a thing with Primus, which I've said 1,000 times before, is based on Rome. So that's all I'm going to say about that because, well, duh. The Island City is based on the Vatican City, and I mean that in several different ways, that the Island City is expressly outside the geopolitical order, or at least it's supposed to be. Is very much like the Vatican. There's a basilica in the Island City that's based expressly on St. Peter's Basilica. So moving on, we have Ravano, which is based on a combination of Genoa and Milan. It's based on Genoa in terms of the fact that it is a maritime republic that gains a lot of power and influence through its trading. Ravano, as you can see here, is in a very good spot with a lot of trade routes going in and out. It also has the inner ocean there, which gives them a lot of ways to make a lot of revenue. And the lords of Ravano are very rich indeed. And I'm not just saying that as a world-building flex, that actually is a plot point. And regarding how Milan falls into this, Milan in the Middle Ages was a medieval industrial hub. Like some of the best armor smiths in Europe were in Milan. You often had wealthy nobles from England and France commissioning armors from these places in Milan. Ravano has a similar thing going on. They are known for their engineering, and they have a lot of mines in there as well. Then we have Ventolso, which is known as the City of Artisans. Ventolso is mostly based off Florence, because again, that's a city that was known for its artisans and stuff, especially in the Renaissance period. But there's a dash of Bologna. which I know that sounds like a vague culinary theme, but no, I'm talking about these towers. Basically medieval skyscrapers, these were commissioned by various noble houses. There's a lot of inappropriate jokes you can make at how they were making these towers to compete with each other. I am not going to go in there, get your minds out of the gutter. I combine these two things because the societal dynamic basically writes itself. Ventoso is expressly a poor city. It doesn't have good fighters. Again, that's a plot point, not just a lore flex. You have these corrupt noble families that are living in these towers, deliberately insulating themselves from the common folk, putting people to sleep with the bread and circuses and art. Many of these towers would be like canvases for famous painters and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it writes itself, man. Then you have Samurcio, which basically takes the worst of Pisa and Venice. We have a city that is perpetually sinking in the mud and is always in a bad spot. Basically, it's a city that is made to fall on some level. It's just a city that's just notorious for bad luck. And this goes beyond even Godshard's Six Strangers. If you've read Godshard's The Uniter, which you should, the book is out now, you would find that Samurcio gets devastated twice in that book. Some cities just don't have any luck at all. And lastly, we're going to talk about Tresvier. It is the hometown of Leo and Martin. It's also where Annabelle and Elizabeth ended up, even though they weren't originally from there. Tresvier takes heavy influences from Venice in a different way, both of them being a rising star and trading power that is trying to break the yoke of its influence with Ravano to become its own independent kind of city-state. And this is part of the political dynamic you see at the start of Godshard's The Six Strangers. Again, it's a plot point. Everything with Ravano and Tresvier that I'm mentioning here, like as plot points, it's not something I focus on, but if you look really carefully, you can see that there's a little bit of a B plot going on in the background that's also going to come to a head in Volume 3. As you can see, I brought a lot of myself to both these Godshard stories, and it has been an absolute blast writing it. I hope that when you guys read Godshards, you appreciate it as much as I do, because Italy is such a beautiful land. It is a beautiful culture. It's a part of who I am, and it's a part of the Godshards world.